One way of understanding what happens in the text of the opening ceremony, therefore, is that in invoking an image of Beijing on the screen, the opening ceremony blurs the distinction between the real urban environment and its phantasmagoric shadow. In Jameson's terms, the real history is displaced by the aesthetics. We see this displacement enacted in the footsteps superimposed upon the live event of the opening ceremony. In the power demonstrated in the sheer size of the spectacle, the displacement is written into both the individual and collective experience of the viewer. The text of the opening ceremony, then, extends into space the qualities of film. Produced by a famous film director, created with the camera in mind, marketed afterwards as a DVD set, the ceremony is an odd hybrid of history, film, and live event. In this aspect, the construction of this text is best understood as a giant, enormously expensive nostalgia film. In particular, we found the work of Rachel useful. In Sentimental Fabulations, Cho writes, "The ever-expanding capacities for seeing and, with them, the infinite transmigrations and transmutations of cultures, national, ethnic, rural, illiterate, into commodified electronic images are part and parcel of a dominant global regime of value-making that is as utterly ruthless as it is utterly creative." Cho's emphasis is upon the ruthless fact that no one can avoid being seen. Nonetheless, the impact is also a creative one with regard to identity formation. It is not simply that we are powerlessly subsumed into a homogenizing Americanization, but that our cultural identity is inevitably doubled, local and global, by the instant mediation of commodification. We have to contextualize the Beijing Olympics into this ruthless but creative formation of identity. The ceremony is also, however, a staged political demonstration along the line of Maoist red girls assembling in Tiananmen Square in the 60s and 70s, the reduction of politics into spectacle. Therefore, what we are witnessing now is the permeation of spectacle into everyday perception of the world. As an extension of our film, the opening ceremony provides a new constitution of spatiality. In a postmodern city, it is the perceived that has gained ontological depth. That reversal, that perceptions shape what is seen, rather than what is seen shapes perceptions, is particularly evident in a story Michael Dutton tells about the Gate of Heavenly Peace, which was damaged beyond repair in a 1966 earthquake. Faced with the prospect of demolishing the gate, a symbol of the legitimacy of the political order, and only a short time after the Cultural Revolution had been proclaimed from its vault, the Maoist regime balked. Instead, the decision was made to keep the demolition of the gate a secret. Between December 1969 and March 1970, the gate was covered by a scaffold, surreptitiously dismantled and then replaced by a perfect replica. The story provides a little analog of the process of demolition and creation of meaning. In the rebuilding of the gate, the appearance of history is produced as a spatial domain. The Maoist project of historical determinism conceals the elevation of image. The gate, too, has become part of a vast collection of images, a multitudinous simulacrum. Even Marxist history is known only as an arrangement of images. This example also shows that history in Beijing involved false surfaces even before the third cartography. The imperial and Maoist city, in a manner of speaking, were equally arbitrary constitutions of spatialities. The only change in the postmodern map is that its embrace of fiction is no longer hidden under a scaffold. At the core, therefore, these three distinct maps are intimately related despite their disparate ideologies. In the Parallax View, Slavoj Žižek discusses a similar phenomenon. His example is taken from Claude Lévi-Strauss's account in Structural Anthropology of a tribe in the Great Lakes. Members of the tribe drew two very distinct maps of their village, depending on their social position. These two maps, Žižek argues, do not merely show a difference in their point of view, but they also describe a hidden truth shared within the community, as the three maps of Beijing also do. Žižek writes, "The very splitting into the two relative perceptions implies a hidden reference to a constant, not the objective, actual disposition of buildings, but the traumatic kernel, a fundamental antagonism the inhabitants of the village were unable to symbolize, to account for, to internalize, to come to terms with, an imbalance in social relations that prevented the community from stabilizing itself into a harmonious whole." Žižek called the shared truth of the Great Lakes villagers the traumatic kernel, a parallax. The parallactic real, he writes, is the traumatic core of some social antagonism which distorts the tribe members' view of the actual arrangement of the houses in their village. Similarly, the three maps of Beijing represent the three disrupted points of view that in their totality provide a vision of Beijing's own capitalized real. The mutability of historical surfaces in Beijing also helps to understand why film has been so important in Beijing and China's emergence as such an important cultural product in the last 2 decades. Films since 1987, The Last Emperor and Red Sorghum, have moved from generally factual depictions of the past to increasingly fantastic constitutions of the pastness. 1998's Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, for example, presents Beijing as a space of fantasy and sorcery. The act of remembering has been replaced by the construction of fantasy. The more satisfying truth is the constructed truth. The cinematic projection of Beijing has become more and more imaginary. It is no longer possible to see the city in the same way because we have been so influenced by the cinematic projection. In this context, even the Forbidden City, a place we usually conceive as one of the city's best-known ancient relics, begins to appear differently. Although it was not torn down and rebuilt in as literal a way as the Gate of Heavenly Peace, the historical authenticity of the Forbidden City is also something of a production. The site began widely welcoming large numbers of foreign tourists after the release of Bernardo Bertolucci's The Last Emperor in 1987, the year when the site was registered as one of China's first World Heritage Sites. As the historian Jeremy R. Barme says, the success of that film came at a time when the Palace Museum was learning to market itself, and it had a profound impact on how this was done. With the dust blown away, the site began to shine again, but this time as a commodity in the global market. International exhibitions held by the Palace Museum have gained enormous popularity overseas, with increasing frequency within the last 30 years. What has happened is a constitution of intelligibility, namely the norms of regulation within which objects are arranged and then discovered. We now witness the city as simulacra of the place, images in tourist guidebooks, exotic films, or news coverage circulating in what Rachel would call the global regime of value making.